let's take a break from talking about VTuber misdeeds and just make a video where I can laugh at someone. Mainly for the sake of my mental health, but also because, quite frankly, the guy in question that I'm gonna be covering in this video deserves to be taken down a peg. Let's talk about the latest anti-woke grifter who, in my opinion, has become a Lolcow, Jon Del Arroz. Mr. Arroz, whose full name somehow manages to be the whitest Hispanic name possible, as it literally translates to John of the Rice, is what I like to call a basement pisser. It's a collective name I use for people who make anti-woke content in the same vein as The Quartering, who is probably one of the most well-known channels who makes this garbage. Specifically, John is the reactionary variant of basement pisser. The other variant is Gooner. I'll give an example of a basement pissing Gooner in a future video. Now, I could do a fact check of John's entire videography, similar to the one Todd in the Shadows did for James Somerton, because there is a lot of misinformation there. But instead, I'm just gonna laugh at how much of a loser JDA is. Mainly because I just want an easy video. But anyways, as usual, don't harass anyone I bring up in the video, and I'm still hearing things. Oh well, let's get started.
You never know. You never know. Maybe I'm gonna pee in my trash can down here. I don't know.
Jon isn't exactly the smartest YouTuber. One notable example of him not thinking things through came from June 26, 2024 in a now deleted post that I fortunately have the screenshots of. Jon posted a guide on how to avoid being canceled. The initial post was deleted, but someone archived it and I was able to find the second tweet that I'll show as well. And I do remember seeing this myself, so I can vouch for it. Anyways, the tweet in question was a rules for surviving cancel mobs. Now, given the date that this was posted, I don't think it's unreasonable to assume he was posting this in response to the Dr. Disrespect controversy. Now, Jon was at least not doing what Yellow Flash was doing, namely making a defense of Dr. Disrespect that he had to delete after 10 minutes because Doc pretty much shot said defense in the dick with his response, or glazing him like The Quartering was. Unfortunately for Jon, the post was seen by one Dick Masterson. If you don't know who Dick Masterson is, he's the host of The Dick Show. No idea if there's a deleted episode where someone took that show's name literally, and the biggest problem in the universe. He's a bit of a troll if you can't tell. Mr. Masterson suggested, albeit somewhat crudely, a helpful addition to Mr. Del Arroz's guide. It's something that I've heard other people say before, but in general, prevention is the best medicine. This really pissed off JDA, who wound up blocking Mr. Masterson. Now, Jon might think he looks like he's triumphantly shutting down an opponent, but with the context of the original argument, it comes across more as him rage quitting. He then tried to spin it as Mr. Masterson attempting to rile the crowd up about JDA's takes on the new Zelda, something which, to my knowledge, Mr. Masterson has never commented on. He strikes me as more of a boomer shooter guy anyways, and that's assuming he does play video games. Jon would later get Mr. Masterson to block him, but it comes off more as Mr. Masterson just getting bored and wanting to move on, rather than Mr. of the Rice triumphantly vanquishing him. Also, since he brings it up, let's talk about his take on the new Zelda. The Zelda in question was Echoes of Wisdom, which is notable for having Zelda as the main character instead of Link. Now, call me crazy, but this should not be a controversial thing at all. I can understand someone being upset that the games are using the same art style as the Link's Awakening remake. That is a matter of personal preference, and I can get someone preferring the art style from, say, Twilight Princess or Skyward Sword. In fact, I kind of wish Echoes of Wisdom had used the Wind Waker / Minish Cap art style, since that's the style the 2D Zelda games had when I grew up. I can also understand someone being upset that Sheik isn't a playable character. I am aware of that canceled Retro Studios game where you would have played as Sheik, so if Mr. of the Rice's complaints revolved around one of those 2 points, then fair enough. Instead, Mr. of the Rice chose to frame Echoes of Wisdom as Nintendo turning Zelda into a girl boss franchise. Alright, you can't see my air quotes. Which is laughable, since if that was the case, wouldn't they make Linkle, that gender bent version of Link from the Hyrule Warriors games, the main character? And this one actually got him backlash from his own fans, which you can see if you visit the comments section of the video. This is also a prime example of why I will immediately disregard the opinion of anyone who tries to use the term girl boss unironically. It also exposes JDA as a Zelda tourist. I say this because if Jon really had played as many Zelda games as he claims he's played, he'd know that Zelda has been playable before. All the Hyrule Warriors games, Candace of Hyrule, I guess you could count Spirit Tracks, and Super Smash Bros. Have all featured Zelda as playable. No, we do not talk about those two games. Get them out of here and don't bring them up. Also, for someone who is supposedly super passionate about Zelda, Jon sure doesn't talk about Zelda. I looked through his channel and I was able to find one other video talking about Zelda, which was talking about how an article was discussing how Link had become a trans icon. Something I'd like to point out that Nintendo doesn't have any control over, since it's not uncommon for stuff to be adopted by a different audience. If you want an example of this, the Village People did not intend for YMCA to be adopted as an LGBT pride song. Or We Will Rock You by Queen, which I'm willing to bet most of you think of as a sports anthem, actually talks about the 3 stages of life for a man. So I'm gonna confidently say that Jon is just a Zelda tourist. Or, if you want another example of Jon's lack of intelligence in action, there was the time in a now deleted tweet where he attacked Comics Matter with your boy Zach over the latter attacking the Critical Drinker. Or rather, when he attacked Zach because he completely misinterpreted a community post that Zach made. Because in the post in question, Zach was talking about George R.R. Martin and how whenever The Winds of Winter was released, the people shown in the screenshot would tear it apart. Which, as someone who has never read a single book of Game of Thrones or watched a single episode of the TV series, I would actually say is a very reasonable comment, since even I've heard complaints about how Martin is taking forever to write The Winds of Winter. Plus, the first Ryan Drake book wasn't even released until 2012. If you'd taken even less than a minute to double check this, you wouldn't look this stupid, Jon. I mean, if you were going to attack Zach for something, it should be his, quite frankly, idiotic assumption that George cares about what people like the Critical Drinker think, since last I checked, the Critical Drinker is a film critic, not a book critic. As far as I know, Zach hasn't read any of Drinker's books, although considering every review of them that I've seen is mixed and negative, not to mention that the trailer for the film adaptation of one of Drinker's books was flooded with negative comments, maybe there was a reason why JDA assumed that was who Zach was talking about. JDA actually did get called out for this, and he deleted his post, probably not realizing that people had already screen capped this display of stupidity from him. This isn't the only time Jon has completely misunderstood a post by someone else. Author Chuck Wendig made a post talking about how he'd seen someone go absolutely ballistic over seeing Donald Trump on TV. The tweet is written in a way that there isn't any way to interpret it in a different way. Yet Jon somehow interprets it as Chuck Wendig describing something that he, Wendig, did, and tags the Secret Service as if Wendig himself was threatening Donald Trump. And when called out for it, Jon doubled down. If you haven't figured it out by now, Jon has the inability to admit that he's wrong. There's also the time he decided to steal a woman's identity. See, Jon writes books under a pseudonym, Daniela Acera. However, the problem is that instead of using a stock photo for the author's portrait, he used a photo of an actual woman who has stated that she did not consent for Jon to steal her identity. Oh, and he's apparently using that identity to write smut. Although, given that he's spoken positively about AI, I can't help but feel that he's actually using AI to write that smut. This is just a theory, however. Although his choice in writing material, assuming that the claims about his books under that pseudonym are in fact true, is a bit questionable, given that Jon has called for the Trump administration to ban Playboy and has outright stated that he wants porn banned. So there are two possible explanations for this contradiction. The obvious one being that Jon is too stupid to realize that if the Trump administration does ban porn, his smut books will also get hit with the ban. The other possibility? He wants his smut books to be the only form of erotic content that you can legally consume. I'm going with the second possibility because it's funnier. When she did call him out over this, rather than just apologizing, he doubled down and insisted he did nothing wrong. Now, let's talk about how Jon is where facts aren't just distorted, they're... I'm gonna have to find the reason why I keep on hearing that sooner rather than later. But anyways, let's move on to how Jon is more than happy to spread fake.
My wife went out for pizza without me, and I'm angry about it. So I'm going to win this round, and I'm going to pee. If I don't win this round, I'm going to pee in my own basement.
Now, I'm going to start off by talking about something with another content creator first, and it might seem unrelated, but it'll give some context for the rest of the segment. I can't show screenshots since some of the posts were deleted before I could screenshot them, but I'll show what I can. On Valentine's Day of this year, the YouTuber SmashJT published a video where he claimed that an inside source at Ubisoft had told him that Assassin's Creed Shadows was being delayed by a month or two. However, this would later reveal to be McDizzle Gaming tricking SmashJT, which revealed that SmashJT had accepted the story at face value without verifying it at all. To Smash's credit, he did acknowledge that he had been tricked in a video, although by his own logic, namely he's accused Alyssa Mercantile of doxing him because she filed a defamation lawsuit against him and made his name public thanks to the court records, he doxed McDizzle in the same video, which actually led to Sid Alpha, who I am a fan of, to call out Mr. JT for both that and a bunch of other stuff. If you want more information on this, I'll link Sid's video in the description. Now, you might be wondering, why do I bring this up since so far it seems unrelated? Well, Mr. Of the Rice was one of the people who actually talked about the story and how Mr. JT got tricked. Now, if that was all there was to it, I would actually give Mr. Of the Rice props for doing so. I believe that every faction of the internet should have a few people to self-police their own members. However, here's the thing. Mr. Of the Rice is not only guilty of spreading fake news, he's arguably worse than Mr. JT. See, Jon is an evangelical Christian, which also is reflected in his content. Now, my stance on religion can be summed up by this quote from the works of Scottish poet Joe McGinn. Specifically, it's from The Hell I Fear, the fourth entry on his 2013 release, Peace Was Never an Option.
Everyone has the right to express themselves, I say. Whether it's God, Buddha, Satan, Hare Krishna, or Allah, you will always.
Namely, I have no problem with people following a religion as long as you don't force your beliefs on others. If your faith is what gets you through the day, that's perfectly fine. But Mr. Of the Rice does not think that way, because he's let his religious beliefs influence some of the fake news he's helped spread. Jon, as well as another anti-woke content creator named Jay Viper, and a video games journalist, can't see my air quotes unfortunately, named John Trent, on a site called Fandom Pulse that Mr. Of the Rice runs, has accused the game Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, or as Jon seems to think it's called, Kingdom Deliverance Come 2, given that I found a total of 21 tweets where he uses the initials KDC to refer to the game, of featuring pedophilic sodomy scenes. Jon's argument hinges mainly on the fact that the game's codex says that the gay option in question, Hans Capon, apologies if I mispronounced that, was allegedly born around 1388, which, if that was the year he was born in, would make him 15 when the games happened. Even though the way it's written looks more like that was when they started putting him on the records, as opposed to when he was actually born. Jon also tried to claim that Henry of Skalitz, the main character of both games, was underage, using a Fandom Pulse article written by Mr. Trent that cited some post by Warhorse's social media manager. This got to the point where Daniel Favreau, again, if he sees this, I do apologize if I mispronounced that name of yours, the head writer, likely fed up with people like Jon spreading bullshit, outright stated that no, Hans is not a minor, and in fact, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 does not feature any child characters whatsoever. This has easily gotta be some of the most unethical journalism in gaming that I've seen. Hey, look at that! Gamergate was right. There's an example of unethical journalism right there. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 later received an update which clarified in the game's codex that yes, Hans Capon, the gay option that I mentioned, was in his 20s. However, rather than admit he was wrong or dropping the issue, Jon has opted to double down. He even later outright stated that it doesn't matter if the character's age was 15 or 20, that gay sex scenes shouldn't be in games. This actually annoyed people who are part of the Gamergate movement, since I saw at least one person in the pro Gamergate subreddit Kotaku in Action get so annoyed by Fandom Pulse over this and other articles that the site has put out that they actually requested that Mr. Of the Rice and Fandom Pulse be blacklisted on the subreddit over this. Jon has actually tried to defend his credibility with the Gamergate crowd by pointing out that he worked for Milo Yiannopoulos. Although, if I was in his shoes and I was making this claim, I would actually think twice about doing so, because I'll get back to why in a few seconds. I was actually curious about if this would count as unethical journalism. My gut said yes, but as I'm not a journalist, I wouldn't just go with that. So I asked someone who is very vocal and passionate about ethical gaming journalism, the aforementioned Sid Alpha. He said this: I can honestly state that I have not read it. But knowing Jon, yeah, probably. As you can see, Jon's reputation is such that, while Sid didn't outright say yes, he was willing to say that based on reputation alone, JDA's post and the articles he were promoting were probably unethical journalism. I will admit that I made a mistake in asking the question, since I had asked the question when I was under the assumption that Mr. Of the Rice was the person writing the articles the claim was coming from, when his video was just reading an article by his website, Fandom Pulse, with the article being written by someone else, the aforementioned John Trent. Although, in my defense, Jon was posting this stuff on Twitter a lot. But I wasn't paying money to Fandom Pulse just for the sake of this video, so you'll have to forgive my mistake. Now, I could point out that Jon overlooks the fact that Crusader Kings 3 can allow male characters, and female characters for that matter, that are 15 or even younger to get married. In fact, you could even have them get in incestuous marriages. But I haven't found anything to suggest that Jon knows of the Crusader Kings franchise, so I'll let that one slide. I can also point out that Jon is unintentionally slandering Valve, since you can buy this game on Steam, meaning that Jon is indirectly saying Valve is okay with pedophilia. Although I cannot but find it amusing that Jay Viper proceeded to do something that kicked off the second Gamergate movement, namely he encouraged people to report Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, when the thing is, the second Gamergate movement only really kicked off because as Kindred of Sweet Baby Inc. encouraged people to report the Sweet Baby Inc. Detected Steam group. I could also just post the "you control the buttons you press" tweet, or the fact that literally everything else in the game suggests that Henry and Hans are in their 20s, aside from that one detail and a social media post or two. But there's something about Jon's actions when covering this that are kind of telling about him in an unintentional way. Namely, Jon is unintentionally admitting he has no problem with grooming and pedophilia as long as the offending party is of the opposite gender. I say this because A, the main character of Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, Henry of Skalitz, can have sexual encounters with both men and women in the game, and B, in the first Kingdom Come Deliverance, which takes place immediately before the events of Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, meaning Henry would be the same age, you could have sexual encounters with women, something that Jon has been awfully quiet about. If the gay sex scenes in Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 are pedophilic, then so are the straight scenes in both games. So, to Jon of the Rice, I have one question. How are the straight scenes in both games not pedophilic? There's also the fact that, you know, Jon didn't talk about the first game at all, which would suggest that he's a Kingdom Come Deliverance tourist in addition to being a Zelda tourist. I'm now wondering what other franchises he's a tourist of. Metroid? Mario? Probably not Pokemon for reasons I'll go into later. Also, remember how I mentioned that Jon used the fact that he worked for Milo Yiannopoulos as a way to tout his Gamergate cred? Well, there's a reason I said that if I was in his shoes, I wouldn't be bringing that up, since I'll just play the clip that got Milo canceled, and you can probably see why.
This is a controversial point of view I accept, but we get hung up on this you know, this sort of child abuse stuff. And to the point where we're you know, heavily policing even relationships between consenting adults, you know, sort of grad students and professors at universities.
Well, actually, Milo, I have a video on consent if you want to watch that.
Well, let's address a little more of this.
I think I'm okay.
I was after I lost my virginity. I was in my teens. I was in my teens.
14.
I was in my teens. Something like that.
But I do have to wonder, if Milo is okay with adults getting their cocks sucked by 14-year-olds, what would happen if a 14-year-old wanted to?
Yeah, look at him. Holy shit.
Is that me without my glasses on? Hold on.
It does look like Paul. It's British Paul.
It's British Paul with hair.
Can we put some aviators on him? Can we put some aviators and a hooker in his hand? Can we see what he looks like?
Someone can do that. Audience, make that for Milo.
The whole consent thing for me is once again, it's not this black and white thing that people try and paint it. There some 13-year-olds out there capable of giving informed consent to have sex with an adult? Probably. But I was also a 13-year-old. I hung around with 13-year-old guys, you know, when I was 13, and there were some of them that still thought girls were fucking icky at 13. Like, not many, but like they were just coming out of that phase. I don't know that I was ready at 13 to get fucked in the ass by a 28-year-old black drag queen, is what I'm saying. So you can't. The reason these age of consent laws exist is because we have to set some kind of a barometer here. We've got to pick an age and go, okay, look, this is the age where we can reasonably be assured you're an adult, you can give informed consent, you understand the risks and pregnancy risks, and all that bullshit.
And I think the law is the law is probably about right. That's probably roughly the right age. I think it's probably about okay. But there are certainly people who are capable of giving consent at a younger age. I certainly consider myself to be one of them. People who are sexually active younger. I think it particularly happens in the gay world, by the way. And in many cases, actually, those relationships with older men. This is one of the. This is one of the reasons I hate the left. This sort of stupid, one size fits all policing of culture. This arbitrary
Milo.
This arbitrary.
Let him talk.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll
be quick. This arbitrary and oppressive idea of consent, which totally destroys, the understanding that many of us have of the complexities and subtleties and complicated nature of many relationships. People are messy and complex, and actually, in the homosexual world, particularly, some of those relationships between younger boys and older men, the sort of coming of age relationships, the relationships in which those older men help those young boys to discover who they are and give them security and safety and provide them with love and a reliable and sort of a rock where they can't speak to their parents. Some of those relationships are some of the most
molestation to me. It sounds
well,
like
you know what?
It sounds like Catholic priest molestation to me.
And you know what? I'm grateful for Father Michael. I wouldn't give nearly such good head if it wasn't for him.
Oh my God! I can't handle it.
It's funny because
what is wrong with you, Ben?
Ben gave me some homework on you, Milo. He gave me a few videos to watch to brush up on my Miloisms. And one of the things that you said in one of these clips was that transgenderism is the new, frontier of rights. My wording is bad here, but it's the new frontier of social progress. And the next thing in line is going to be pedophilia. And yet here you are talking about how, look, some of these kids that get diddled by these priests, I mean, it's a good thing for them. They're getting this love. And now they are also getting
You're misunderstanding what pedophilia means. Pedophilia is not a sexual attraction to somebody 13 years old who is sexually mature. Pedophilia is attraction to children who have not reached puberty. Pedophilia is attraction to people who don't have functioning sex organs yet, who have not gone through puberty, who are too young to be able to understand the way their bodies work. That is not what we're talking about.
And Coulter.
Granted.
You don't understand what pedophilia is if you think that I'm defending it, because I'm certainly
not. I'm not saying you're defending it. I'm saying you're walking the borderline.
No, that's not what you said. You said I was defending it. And you were wrong.
Fine. I retract my statement, Milo. I retract my statement. I shan't slander you further, but you are advocating for cross-generational relationships here. Can we be honest about that?
Yeah, I don't mind admitting that, and I think particularly in the gay world and outside the Catholic Church, if that's where some of you want to go with this, I think in the gay world, some of the most important, enriching, and incredibly, life-affirming, important, shaping relationships, very often between younger boys and older men, can be hugely positive experiences for those young boys. They can even save those young boys from desolation, from suicide,
they're consensual. Hold on.
all sorts of things. Provided they're consensual.
That's right. Milo basically advocated for the same type of relationships that Mr. of the Rice is accusing Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 of having. Now, before anyone takes it out of context, I'm not saying that Jon is pro-pedophilia. There is no evidence I found to suggest that's the case. But if Jon really had a problem with the non-existent pedophilia in Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, and not the fact that there are gay options in the game, he wouldn't be touting the fact that he worked for someone who actually advocated for pedophilia like it's a badge of honor. In fact, considering he has a track record of accusing people he doesn't like of defending pedophilia without any evidence, I can't help but wonder if he knows what pedophilia actually is. Unfortunately for Mr. of the Rice, Daniel Vavra found some stuff that I'm willing to bet that Jon would rather not have people know about and use that stuff to ratio Jon. I'll get into the stuff that you're seeing in these tweets later because they deserve their own segments. In fact, several other anti-woke channels, likely realizing how badly this was looking for anti-woke channels in general, actually started calling him out as well. But anyways, one other thing Jon's evangelical beliefs have caused him to do is, and I swear I'm not making this up, deny the Satanic Panic. This is in spite of the fact that the panic in question is actually quite documented, such as in one of my favorite books, Unmask Alice. I'm showing some tweets that highlight examples on screen right now. Now, it would be one thing if Jon was saying he didn't remember the panic, which would be fair enough, but come on. You know, I'm half surprised I didn't find Jon making posts defending Confederate statues and, oh, he's one of those morons. Even though the noose was fake, the Confederacy shouldn't get a participation trophy, Jon. NASCAR should have removed Confederate flags a long time ago, but it was better late than never. But anyways, him denying the Satanic Panic is something that a ton of people gave him backlash for. And he even got community noted. I'm kind of surprised no one made a Twitter versus Jon Del Arroz video. Seriously, Boblox, you missed out on some easy content. In another example of him outright lying, and this one involves Mr. JT again, he once claimed that he had patched things up and was on good terms with Mr. JT. As you can see from the community note in the screenshot, this was disputed by Mr. JT, who actually posted a video response, which I'll play now.
I find it curious that Jon Del Arroz seemed to think that DMing me was going to be a good idea to try to resolve this conflict. Like, that's not how this works. You are a weirdo, furry, Christian zealot that's trying to inject censorship in all places, especially video games and banning pornography. And you stand for a lot of things that I don't stand for. And you know what? That's fine. You're welcome to your position. Just like anyone else is welcome to their other positions. It's fine. It's totally fine. And we're talking about it, debating it publicly. And you, objectively, were getting your ass kicked publicly. So then you come into DMs and start talking to me. And I'm busy actually, doing work and covering shit. Don't have time to deal with your bullshit that you're throwing out there. Whatever. It is what it is. I acknowledge you. We chat briefly, ever so briefly. And I just acknowledge you. And then you just go spout that everything's fine. We're good. We resolved it behind the scenes and we chatted and we're good. Bro, why do you come to my DMs when you're getting your asses kicked to you publicly? Like coming to my DMs and then trying to pretend like you somehow won and we came to some sort of agreement? That didn't happen. This is some sort of like false fantasy reality that you're living in. Nothing changed, dude. You still stand for these things that I strongly disagree with. And I am going to be fighting against that just as much as I fight against the wokies. So it is what it is, man.
But anyways, okay, I know I can't be the only one hearing that, but until I figure out what's actually causing that sound, let's just move on. Anyways, let's talk about Jon's history of harassing other people, shall we?
What do we think about that? I don't have a bathroom down here. Oh, we made it. I was ready to pee my pants.
At various points, Jon has claimed that he has been attacked because he's Hispanic and is a Christian. Now, I do not condone harassment, so if he has received any actual harassment because of this, I do not support that. But here's the thing. Jon doesn't seem to follow the golden rule of treat others as you would want to be treated. As I mentioned, he's an evangelical Christian. Well, I know he wants to force his beliefs down other people's throats because of his answer to a question about Muslim Americans, where he said that he supported their forcible conversion into Christianity. So, religious tolerance for me, but not for thee. Yet, if you listen to him, he's the actual victim. For example, he once accused someone of doxing his kid. However, the doxing, oh right, you can't see my air quotes, consisted of posting information that Mr. of the Rice himself had made public in a Periscope video, and he later made public in an interview where he was talking about dropping out of a congressional campaign. Jon, by your own logic, you're the one who doxed your own kid. He would also complain about people coming out for his job over political speech, which he proceeded to do to someone else. There are other examples, and if you want to see them, I'll link to a blog post containing a bunch, but before I move on, I'll highlight one more example of how he harasses people. In 2018, Jon decided to sue Worldcon after he was banned that year because he made it clear that he was going to break the con's code of conduct. He claimed it was because of his race, religion, and politics. However, his claim about it being because of his race falls flat if you look at the guest of honor and see the Mexican-American John Picasso on that list. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Religion is something that most guests to Worldcon actually don't really discuss, and while the con did honor Ursula K. Le Guin, whose works are critical of organized religion as a whole, None of the guests of honor were particularly well known for being critical of Christianity specifically, and just aren't particularly vocal about their religious beliefs. So I'm going to say that Jon is lying about them targeting him for his faith. As for his politics, Larry Carrera, an author who is on the same side of the political spectrum as Mr. Of the Rice, gave a strong rebuttal of him that I'll read right now. I haven't talked about you for years until your dumbass showed up on my page trying to milk a controversy to make it all about you. You're just a narcissistic grifter. You're not on my team. You're on a team that consists of you and your bizarrely overinflated ego. Everybody is wise to your shtick except a handful of mopes who buy into your exaggerated fake Christian alpha male try-hard act. They don't realize that behind the scenes, you wanted it so hard to write for us that you were an annoying, cloying suck-up, and you got rejected not for politics, but because you're just not that good, and you've had a chip on your shoulder ever since. Jon compared his suit against Worldcon to the struggles the LGBT community was facing in their fight for marriage equality, which is laughable considering what I've shown he's posted so far. Jon still tried to get into Worldcon that year despite his ban still being in effect. In February of the following year, a judge struck down 4 of the 5 actions in the lawsuit JDA filed, with only the last part, which was basically more about damage to Jon's reputation and from the reasons given to the ban, not being struck. While Worldcon and Jon did settle out of court, I'm more inclined to believe that Worldcon chose to do this because while they likely would have won the case, they would have incurred more in legal fees. I say this because the settlement was a public apology and $4,000 in damages, whereas in addition to the public apology, Jon was demanding an honorary unbanning, $50,000 in damages, and appointment to the role of diversity and inclusivity officer to the organization. So I guess Jon is in favor of DEI and requiring the board to attend diversity training courses. Now, you might wonder why I'm making this video if Jon harasses people, considering I'm pretty much putting a target on my head. Well, I found one thing that acts as a kill shot. I'll get to that later. But let's talk about how Jon is a very insecure man.
I'm ready. I don't have a toilet down here. All I have is a drain in the floor. I feel like we're going to have to use it, though. I feel like we're going to have to use it.
One thing I've noticed about most of the anti-woke grifters is that they tend to be insecure about something, and their content kind of acts as a compensation for that insecurity. Melanie Mack is insecure about her divorce. The Quartering is insecure about he's the Quartering. It's probably easier for me to name things that he isn't insecure about. And Mr. Of the Rice is no exception. He has 2 notable insecurities. The second one I'm going to give its own segment. As for the first, well, he's insecure about his relationships. I say this because his wife got a restraining order against him for domestic violence. You probably thought I had forgotten about this one, hadn't you? Well, anyways, one thing I've seen people use to defend him is that he doesn't have a criminal record. But here's the thing. You don't need to be convicted to get a restraining order filed against you. And I highly doubt it's a different person who just has the same name, because Jon is well aware that people use this as an easy way to bash him. I've already provided examples, so I'm not going to show any on screen. Yet, as far as I can tell, he's never stated, hey, that isn't me. If I was in his shoes and someone else with my name had a domestic violence restraining order filed against me, I'd want to put it out there that I'm not that person at least once. Because while you don't have to respond to something, the more you ignore something people use against you, the worse it looks. But there's a few other things to note here. First of all, he's gotten divorced once, and he is married to a different woman now. And according to court records, he met said woman while, in the eyes of the law and God, he was still married to his first wife. I could point out that it is kind of contradictory for him to be so pro-Trump when Trump has deported people just for being Latino, even if they were married to someone who is a citizen of the US. But instead, I'd like to point out that if Samantha, his previous wife, was in fact just saying that he was abusive against her and there was no actual abuse, she sure is committed to that story since she is still seeking a domestic violence case against him. Also, side note, can we just stop using the fact that he beats his wife as the only own against him? Not because he doesn't deserve it or anything. He does, and quite frankly, I'm surprised that alone hasn't gotten him called out by more commentary channels, but rather, well...
Do you have the slightest idea how little that narrows it down?
Yeah, it turns out that there's more than one anti-woke grifter that you can describe by saying the guy who beats his wife. There's also 6 Alex Hexenhammer. He's the Quarter-Rings co-host, so I'm counting him. I guess you could count Steven Crowder, although I'd probably file him under Pundit before I filed him under Anti-Woke Grifter, and probably a few others who I don't know about. I'm not saying you can't use this as a way to make fun of him, although it is a sensitive subject, so just make sure you aren't doing this at the expense of his ex-wife. I'm just saying that you're missing out by not bringing up other stuff that you can make fun of him with. Plus, you might as well be better than John when it comes to covering sensitive subjects. If you want an example of how badly he covers sensitive subjects, look at how he handled the stuff regarding Ed Piskor, who was accused of grooming minors. John has gloated how he got Ed to shut down the cartoonist Kayfabe YouTube channel, but when Piskor took his own life, John proceeded to immediately act as if he was always sympathetic to Ed. John, I know that you don't have to defend every other anti-woke grifter out there, but seriously, using Piskor's suicide to make money is a low blow. What the hell is wrong with you? I sure hope that whatever money you made off that video was worth it. And for the record, no, I am not defending Piskor over what he did. Grooming minors is wrong, and DMs were shown. Now, you might think that this segment is short compared to the others. Well, that's because the other thing he's insecure about, as I mentioned, deserves its own segment. And I think I've finally figured out why I keep on hearing that. And it has to do with the last segment. Let's finally address the elephant in the room. Or rather, the Lucario on Mr. of the Rice's hard drive. Namely, he's a furry!
Get up! Get up! No!
John has a certain, let's say, affinity for a specific Pokemon. What Pokemon, you may ask? If you haven't already figured it out. It's not Gardevoir, it's not Vaporeon, it's not Salazzle, it's not Meowscarada, and it's not Lopunny. It's Lucario. And as you can probably tell by the category of Pokemon I listed, I don't just mean he considers Lucario to be his favorite Pokemon. No, I mean he lusts for Lucario. See, it turns out that back before he got into his Christian grift full time, John was actually pretty open about posting about his lust for Lucario, and male Lucario at that, like this post right here. Does this mean that if someone was to mod Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 so that Hans Capon was replaced with a Lucario, he would immediately declare it the best game of all time? Although he has posted very risque art of female Pokemon and furry women, so if this is a true indication of what his actual sexuality is, then I'd say he's bi, not gay. I'm censoring these as I'd rather not find out if they would get a TOS strike from YouTube the hard way. Now, I also like Lucario, but mainly because of its type combination and moveset, which has come in clutch several times for me, both in official games and fan games. Most notably when I played Platinum as a kid, which incidentally is my favorite game in the franchise, excluding spin-offs. John, on the other hand, I have found no evidence to suggest he's played any of the games, so John and I are not the same. I'm an actual fan of the games, while John is a Pokemon sex tourist. I guess it could be worse. He could be a Gen 1er, and at least he's not sexualizing a Pokemon that's clearly supposed to be a minor, like Phantom. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that the Bible does not support gooning to Pokemon. Also, in case you were wondering, this is what you can use as a kill shot against him if he tries to go after you online. He knows he can't defend himself from this because, well, I've never seen him respond to any of the tweets that were posted in replies to him, and he gets ratioed every time. In fact, you know what? Let's do a dramatic reading of some of his tweets. Both the ones where he expresses his affections for Lucario specifically, and some other relevant tweets.
Please don't forget that Edwin the Ace and Jingoistic Pig want some of that fine piece of Lucario ass. Dan the Wolfgang, One Aliens Comic Fan, Mega Shepherd, the QQ. Hey friends, our fellow war campaigners just told me they would like some fine-ass Lucario on their feeds. I follow back all Lucario avatars. The Soy Child, Edwin the Ace, DJ Quad, Puerto Rican Army. Wanna get in on this Lucario and pony ass? Hashtag war campaign, hashtag up fury. Eevee, greater than Lucario? With such a precious flower, how could he not accept Lucario into his back hole? Hail Jim! Hail Lucario! Kids! This is where you post a thick Lucario. Hail Yiffmaster Edwin the Ace! Hashtag war campaign, hashtag up fury. This is why we need hashtag up fury.
This was something he actually tweeted multiple times, so I'm just gonna show a collage right here.
Edwin the Ace, our brother thinks we are not committed to his GIF. Hashtag war campaign. Hashtag alt furry. War campaign is a furry movement now.
It's a big old-fashioned furry orgy.
It's called a GIF. Please be sensitive to war campaign's needs. Edwin the Ace, brother, no. Hashtag war campaign. Hashtag alt furry. Hashtag blame war campaign.
Including my personal favorite.
I should make a story about, like, starfighter pilot space chickens versus foxes. 1, so I can appeal to my hashtag alt-furry base. 2, cause Star Fox references, duh. 3, chickens are funny. Cock Squadron full thrust ahead.
As you can see, it's not just Pokemon that Jon lusts for. He has actually been openly furry. In fact, there's quite a bit of stuff he's posted that goes against his evangelical beliefs, which makes me wonder if he was trying to go for a left-wing grift at first. And in case anyone tries to say he was just playing some elaborate joke, I'm sorry, but that excuse would only work if it was just 2 posts max. There is a point when it can't just be joking, and I'd say that Mr. Of the Rice crossed that point long ago. You know, when I first found out about this, I couldn't help but feel like I was seeing something unfold before my eyes, but I couldn't figure out what it was. Then I realized something. This is Mr. Of the Rice equivalent of this.
Oh my god. I just peed in my basement.
Okay, look, here's the thing. I actually wouldn't have a problem with this if he would just be honest and upfront about it, or at least acknowledge it and say he wasn't into that sort of stuff anymore. Yes, people would still make fun of him for it, but if he owned it, people would give up after a while. Hell, if he was making the same kind of content and was still into Lucario, but was open about how much he wanted to screw Lucario, I'd at least give him props for being open about this sort of thing. Hell, he'd probably gain a few furry fans if he did this. However, not only is Mr. Of the Rice basically not addressing things, he pretends as if he never made those tweets. So I'm gonna make fun of him for it, and quite frankly, so should everyone else. If I had to guess, this, combined with his insecurity about his relationships, are part of the reason why Jon has leaned so hard into the Christian grift. Namely, he's actually insecure about what he gets off to, so he decides to compensate by going as hard as possible into Jesus and also promoting hatred, even though he secretly enjoys stuff that goes against the Bible. And Jon, don't even think you can find a Bible verse that justifies this sort of thing, because I don't think I need to explain why I'm just gonna go with my gut feeling and say that there is no such verse. And this feels like a good point to wrap things up, so let's wrap this up, shall we?
I've literally never lost that round. I've never lost that round. I've never lost that round. Oh my god. I just peed in my basement.
Well, that was actually kind of fun to just make fun of someone. I will probably do this again at some point in the future. I'm gonna return to VTuber expose videos next, and I'll be tackling a big one. Not a big talent, mind you, but rather there's a lot of stuff that this person did. Now look, I'm not saying that you cannot have a conversation about representation in gaming. If you want to have that conversation, that's one that's perfectly fine. But I just don't think Mr. Of the Rice should be part of it, considering how bad faith he is, as I've shown in this video. But anyways, until next time, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for tuning in. I'm Andreas Rebel, and I'll see you on my next assignment. Later.